The week here, Derek, presented by BetMGM. Our first one, Texans at Vikings. Texans only 2-point favorites on the road at Minnesota. Obviously, this game feels much different than it did coming into the year. Even if you had some tepid optimism about what the Vikings could look like, I think there have been elements of this team that have been more exciting, scarier, more encouraging than really anything you probably could have imagined heading into the year. And that starts for me with what this team has been doing on defense. They've been one of the most dynamic, impactful defensive units in the NFL through 2 weeks. I wanted to start this conversation by just zooming out a bit and talking about that group overall. As you've watched what Brian Flores and that group have done over the first 2 weeks of the season, notably against the Niners last week, what feels slightly different to you about what this group feels like compared to what the 2023 Vikings defense was?
I think a couple of things. I would say, first of all, it just feels like because they've developed some of their players who have already been there and then brought in a handful of guys who just fit what they do, like Andrew Van Ginkel. Blake Cashman has been a really nice signing for them. They've just brought in a bunch of guys who fit what they want to do. And so the whole, even though it's still a very chaotic defense, it just feels like everybody kind of fits into place and everybody understands how to make the chaos like actually be this like harmonic thing for them as a defense. So I think they kind of went out and just understood that the types of players that they needed to make this chaotic defense work. And I think that that's been a big thing. I think the other thing too, Flores has only honed his ability to call plays like at the right time. And I think,
Mhm.
a big thing in this game against San Francisco was if you watch like the first half, they're throwing a little bit of everything at Brock Purdy, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. On third down, they were running some like man coverage and stuff. The entire third quarter, they ran as many of those like two deep pressures as they could get. The stuff that where it looks like, the corners are kind of playing a soft cover too. They're playing it high, but like they just threw a bunch of those different looks at Purdy. And so the fact that Flores was like, all right, as soon as we have this forced passing script for Purdy, we're just going to throw this at him until he can beat it. And he just never did.
The question for me coming into this year was, all right, we knew what they were last season. They lived on the extreme end of the spectrum because they had to, because they just didn't have the horses to keep up with people playing in a more traditional way. So I was wondering, do we see more traditional defense from them moving forward? Just stuff that is more familiar to us. It's like, oh, I know what that's supposed to be. I've seen that before. Or do they lean even more into this and just say, we've landed on something here. Let's try to get players in that fit this style and see where we can take it. The answer thus far has definitively been B. It has been door number 2, and it's worked beautifully. And every single move they made this offseason seems to fit the vision that they want to have. Andrew Van Ginkel was, to me, the coolest fit in free agency, even before I saw him be on the field for the Vikings. It makes perfect sense when you think about who they want to be and what his skill set is. The Vikings have dropped someone off the line of scrimmage on 47% of opponent dropbacks this year, according to Next Gen. That is the highest rate in the league comfortably. And Andrew Van Ginkel is that exact type of player that can do that with no problems. He can set the edge against the run. He can rush the passer. He can drop back into coverage. He's perfect for this sort of defense. Blake Cashman fits this because even if Blake Cashman is not the most physical player in the world, he's not taking on a lot of blocks, he does a very good job of covering space in coverage. And when you play the way that they're playing, there's so much air in the middle of the field. And they have a guy there now who, if he can do nothing else, he's very good at doing that and showed that ability against the Niners last week. Even somebody like Jonathan Grenard, right? Danielle Hunter's a great player. But if you're going to try to get younger at that position, somebody like Grenard, who he's got a full bag of moves, the amount of spin moves we saw collectively from the Vikings defensive front last week, it seems like they're doing them like synchronized swimmers at times. And so having a bunch of similar body types and being able to run all these like dynamic stunts with all of them, it really is a beautiful plan coming together with the players they added this offseason. And like you mentioned, guys like Pat Jones and some of the guys that they've had within this organization have really taken a couple steps forward. And when you blend it all together, you get what we've seen over the first 2 weeks. And it has been a really fun unit to watch.
Yeah, I mean, Van Ginkel is a weird player for a weird defense, which is why it's such a great fit, right? And he's great for all the reasons that you mentioned. And then if you just watch a lot of the Vikings, their red zone drives as a defense, I swear to God, every play is made by Van Ginkel. Whether it's like he's coming off of a loop and he's popping off, or he's rushing and then he's getting to the quarterback, or there was one play I know where he got his hands up and deflected a pass. Like he just finds ways to make plays in the red zone. I just think it's incredible. And then Cashman, like you mentioned, the fact that they have like a pretty decent coverage guy in him. The interception that Purdy threw, where it kind of got tipped up a little bit. They're running one of those two deep pressures, and Cashman is the weak side linebacker, the weak side hook linebacker. There's only one passing threat to his side, so he's like, all right, I can melt back to the middle of the field,
Mhm.
drives on it, gets a hand on it, and it gets tipped up for an interception. I mean, just
That's
that type of
exactly what he
stuff.
did in the PBU here earlier in the
Yes.
game too, where he realizes, all right, there's no one over here to my left side. I'm just going to melt back into the route combination to my right, and he gets a hand on the ball. So his instincts and just his feel for where he has to be within this type of defense, even 2 games into his time there, I think has been very impressive.
And that's just good coaching. That's good coaching in the sense of like getting guys to understand, okay, don't just sit here and waste space. If there's grass to be covered where there's no threat where I'm at, okay, I'm just going to go cover grass. And I think that they've done such an incredible job of that pretty much all around the defense.
This is the perfect defense to kind of explain what I think are some of the confusing aspects of the too high discourse that are going on right now. If you look at what the Vikings are doing, they're not playing a ton of it. They're playing less of it than I probably think anecdotally because the coolest things they do are ejecting back into those cover two looks, but they are doing some of it. It's not just that they're playing cover two. We've seen cover two for 50 years, right? Like, I mean, the Bucks are playing all that cover two 25 years ago and dominating the league with it. It's the fact that they're playing Tampa two after lining up in cover zero and then running a bunch of stunts. So you have to have a plan for cover zero if they bring it. When they don't bring it, now you have to figure out what the coverage is behind it. And for that half second while Purdy's trying to figure out what the coverage is, oh yeah, they're running multiple stunts up front with a group of 4 to 5 dynamic pass rushers against offensive lines that are having to pick up all of those games. So when we're trying to figure out, well, why the hell are all these offensive numbers down and why are quarterbacks struggling? It's like 7 different things. And the Vikings specifically are doing all 7 of those things simultaneously in a way that's making it really hard on opposing offenses.
And those exact plays that you mentioned are like, what are the two most just diametrically opposed coverages that you could run? It's probably cover zero and cover two, unless you want to like bring in prevent defense into this, which I'm not going to count. But those are like the two most different things that you can run. And so the fact that they kind of force you to respect both at the same time is very different from when we were living in a world where, okay, just sit in too high and we'll rotate down. It's like, okay, sure, quarters is different than cover three, but it's not like you can still get to a lot of the same answers, but cover zero versus cover two is like it's a different ballgame.
And the pressure manipulation, the protection manipulation, I think is such a huge part of this. And the
Mhm.
Vikings have done a great job of that. They have 11 sacks this year. It leads the league. There's a stat on True Media called splash plays. And it's really kind of what it sounds like. It's TFLs, it's sacks, it's run stuffs, it's passes defense, it stops on third and fourth down. The Vikings have 57 of them through 2 games. That is the most in the NFL pretty comfortably. They've also allowed the fewest yards before contact per rush in the league this season per next gen stats. They are trying to make splash explosive plays on defense. The flip side of this, though, is that as they're trying to do that, you can make splash explosive plays on offense. The Niners, what they were trying to do last week is they were trying to get runs to the C gap just over and over and over again. Because if we're trying to pinpoint personnel wise the weakest members of this Vikings defense, it's the 2 defensive ends in a 5-man front. It's your Jonathan Bullards, it's your Derry Tilleries. And that's what the Niners are trying to do over and over again. And they got some gash plays. So if you're the Texans and you're walking into this game with this sort of mindset of, okay, we can get them if we try the right stuff, we try to pick at the right weak points. What are those for you? Where are you trying to find those splash explosive plays if you're Houston?
I mean, if you can somehow just try to take your one-on-ones on the outside, I think one of the biggest issues is corner is still kind of a problem for this Minnesota team. And when you have a guy like Nico Collins, sometimes the best answer is just isolate him and throw him the ball because he's just that good. I mean, he feels like I don't know if this is hyperbole, but he truly feels like the closest thing we've seen to Julio since Julio.
So I was
Like,
trying to figure out the right comp for it yesterday.
yeah,
I was literally having this conversation with myself and I was like, who is it? Because Julio wasn't like the I don't know. I don't know if Julio is the right answer. Just because Julio's biggest thing that he did really well is like a lot of those deep outside comebacks and blaze
mhm.
outs. He was such a nuanced route runner for somebody that big, but the yak element with Collins being in a 6'4" body, that's to me what just feels different than most guys I've like ever come across.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I feel like Julio is still really good with Yak, but I guess the difference too is Nico's like a really, really good red zone threat. And the common joke with Julio is that he could just never get it done in the red zone for whatever reason. So maybe it's not the great comp, but just in terms of like size, speed, ball skills, route running for
Force
that
of
size.
nature. Like, he
Yeah,
just
just
feels like a
like
force of nature and like that
yes.
T.O. Julio sort of mold right now, even if stylistically the way that he's doing it is a little bit different. I'm with you. And that's
Yeah.
why I was like racking my brain last night. I was like, who is it? Because he does have that force of nature feel to him right now.
I mean, maybe T.O. is good, actually, that's not a bad one, but, like, the Vikings don't have an answer for that. I mean, there's not many answers
Yeah,
for that,
not
right?
many
There's
teams
only
do.
only, like, 3 or 4 corners who can really go, down to down against a guy like that, but the Vikings don't have that guy. So I would say the other thing is the Texans just need to run the ball, but I've kinda got a bone to pick with this rushing offense. I think it's a little bit more static, a little bit more vanilla than I would have liked to see, especially because week 1, they were kinda doing a lot of interesting stuff, and then this game against the Bears, it's all just a lot of their standard zone stuff, and Slowick kind of tried to change it up a little bit in the second half to very little avail. And the Vikings are really going to make you earn it on the ground. Like I still don't think their interior talent is that good, but they run so many run blitzes, so many stunts, so many of these games that it's like they're going to make you earn it. And so if their run game is too vanilla and they can't just vertically displace people, they might have issues.
They were doing a lot of stuff just trying to get the ball on the perimeter in a lot of ways against the Bears. I mean, they're handing the ball off to Tank Dell. They gave a jet sweep to Joe Mixon at one point when Nico Collins was in the backfield. I wonder if we're going to see more of some of that stuff again, just to like, can we get the ball on the edge very quickly? Can we catch them in some of those run blitzes, some of those games that they're trying to run on early downs? And can we get some gash plays that way? Not having Mixon is definitely something to take into account here because there's a chance that he doesn't play. He hasn't been practicing. Damian Pierce hasn't been practicing. So there's a chance we get more Cam Akers than you probably want in a game where one of the best answers you can possibly have is let's just line up and run the ball.
And if a defense like this is going to run a lot of those stunts and stuff, you kind of really need a back who has very good footwork, very good vision, very good patience for that type of stuff. Mixon was showing that he could be good at that. I'm not so sure if we're going to get that from Cam Akers if he has to play.
I'm really excited to watch Stroud have to solve this problem because Brock Purdy, even with his limitations, he is excellent at being like, all right, I'm going from 1 to 5 as quickly as I can. I'm just understanding where are my outlets against whatever they're doing to me defensively. And he had his issues last week because there are guys in passing lanes that just aren't supposed to be there. And Stroud has that similar sort of feel for, okay, that's not there, that's not there, that's not there. If you watch him cycle between stuff, it's incredible just to watch the mechanics of how he plays the position. And this is just a different sort of challenge, even for guys who lean on that element of their game as a strength playing quarterback.
And the one thing, I mean, Stroud is obviously an incredible player, right? But I think the one thing you can get him on is on throws in the 1 to 10 yard area. He'll just kind of assume stuff sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a very smart player. He has a very good arm. He plays with such good timing that 95% of the time he can get away with it. But that pick he almost threw to Kyler Gordon in that Bears game, he's just assuming that that guy is not going to come off the route the way that he does, and then he does, and he almost throws a pick. And so I think there's a chance with this style of Vikings defense that maybe you can bait him into a throw like that.
Let's get to the other side of the ball just very quickly. We've talked a little bit about what Sam Darnold looks like within this offense. And I think our takeaways from Sunday night, going back and rewatching the game, it's kind of how I feel. Like they're just giving him more answers within the offense. He's still going to do 2 or 3 wacky things a game. Sometimes they come back to bite you, sometimes they don't. I mean, that pitch he tried to throw behind Aaron Jones where they lost like 15 yards, if that gets recovered by the Niners, it feels like a very different game. So down to down, I'm encouraged by the way that he looks. And I do think that there's more of a sense of zen in how he's playing the position under Kevin O'Connell. But there's still those couple plays a game where he's going to get the zoomies and it's going to be a little hard to watch. And I think that's just kind of going to be the cost of doing business with Sam Darnold, even if he's making progress in some areas.
Yes, exactly. I mean, what we said coming into this was like, all right, we know Sam Darnold's a volatile quarterback. We just need Kevin O'Connell and the run game to somehow make the offensive infrastructure overall less volatile. And they've done that. And again, you're still going to get 2 or 3 of these plays where Purdy throws a ball or Sam Darnold throws a ball straight at Fred Warner. Okay. He's just going to do that sometimes. Like, that's just, like you said, it's the cost of doing business when you sign Sam Darnold. But they've done such a good job where 80% of the plays they run, there's an easy answer for Sam. And I think, and they're just in a lot of good down and distances because the run game is better than we thought. That is just smoother sailing than I think most of us could have hoped for.
I think that's such a good point to bring up, though. I think it's just about making him, giving him a sense of calm going into the play. It's like, all right, it's 2nd and 6. You don't need to do anything crazy here. And just having that be the state of things as you walk to the line of scrimmage as often as possible, I think helps mitigate some of those moments that we're talking about. The run game stuff has been very impressive. They've been really effective running the ball. And I think that it's a combination of I like the way that it looks up front. Even some of like the 12 personnel runs, like the mechanics of it, I think the details look very good. And the backs that they have just have so much more juice than the guys that they had last year. The stat that I looked at with NGS that jumped out to me last season, the Vikings had 11 carries where they had 10 or more rush yards over expected. So whatever was supposed to be blocked, the back gained 10 yards more than that. 11 carries was 30th in the NFL. They have 4 this year already. They had 11 all of last season. You watch what Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler are doing. It feels a little bit different than the Alexander Madison experience last year.
It sure does. And I said going into last year, Alexander Madison RB1, that is not a thing a serious football team does. And then they immediately went out this year and we were like, all right, we're going to get one of the best running backs in the league who can get these explosive plays for us. You add that on top of the improved run blocking that we've seen some, left guard Blake Brandell has been good. Josh Oliver at tight end, just absolutely crushing people. So they've just done a really good job putting this thing together.
That Johnny Munt, Josh Oliver combination of 12 personnel, I actually like it a lot more than I thought I might coming into the season. And credit to them. They were excited about it even without TJ Hawkinson. And I do think that it's looked pretty good. I actually want to see them run the ball more out of 12 personnel than they have over the first couple games. I think they've only done it like 7 or 8 times. They've been very effective at it. And the Texans, I think, have played 0 snaps of base personnel against 12 personnel this year. So if you want to get them in some lighter bodies and try to run the ball at them, that does feel like an option. A couple other specific game plans in this game or matchups in this game I think are worth watching. Stingley against Jefferson. Stingley followed DJ Moore for a good chunk of that game last week. So what does that matchup look like? And then the Texans edge guys, Anderson and Daniil Hunter against Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. That is a matchup that's going to be worth watching for the entirety of this game. It's a different set of circumstances than what they were dealing with against the Bears last week.
I am very, very excited for that one. Because obviously these are both like all 4 of those guys are truly Pro Bowl level talent. So the fact that we get to just see them go at each other all game is going to be awesome.
Get to our next game of the week here. The Lions at the Cardinals. Lions -3 on the road against Arizona. Let's start this with a Kyler Murray conversation because coming into the
Let's.
year, one of our little offseason, not spats, but points of tension and slight disagreement was that you were just all the way in on Kyler. Like you're a huge Kyler guy. And when I went back and watched last season, there are elements where he's late on that or he's not seeing that as quickly as he should. And that got better as he got more time in the offense. And this is somebody who got dropped in halfway through the season. It was always going to be moments like that. So I wasn't necessarily sure how fast it was all going to come together. You bring Marvin Harrison in, it's year 2 within the system. There are reasons to believe that this offense could be pretty good pretty quickly. I mean, we mentioned them as like a dark horse to be a top 10 offense when we did that show. But I wasn't sure how ready I was to like fully believe last week and the game that Kyler had last week, even if it's the Rams, even if they have some questions about their defense, there's some moments and some foundational things within that game that make it very easy if you want to start to believe.
It sure does. They have because I think what we definitely saw last year out of this offense that I think that we could have pasted onto this year was the run game was going to be really good. Like it's not the most talented offensive line, but when you have Kyler Murray, you
Which
have a really
is
good
so
back.
impressive. The fact that the run game is so good and their offensive line is just like some guys, and we'll talk about that in a second. It really speaks to the detail. Clayton Adams is their offensive line coach, and I think he's done a phenomenal job. And Drew Petzing, their offensive coordinator, it's a well-designed run game.
It's a well-designed run game, and this is just what you get when you have a Kyler Murray, a Lamar Jackson, and Anthony Richardson, like with Jalen Hurts when he was at his healthiest. Like that's just what you get when you have one of these guys. Is that the offensive line in the run game is just it's going to look better. The numbers are always in your favor. So that part I was sure we were going to get. I was fairly confident we were going to get a decent like under center play action, at least structure, just because that you saw parts of it last year, right? Where they were trying to get to this and maybe just didn't always have the personnel, weren't always in the game scripts, maybe to play that way as much as they wanted to. But then you take all of that, you add in a top 5 pick at wide receiver who can run, he can make catches that are contested. He's a really good route runner. And like you knock everybody else on the receiving depth chart, just like one rung down the ladder, it just everything falls into place. And now you have explosive ability. You have the ability to stay on schedule. And then you have a quarterback when shit hits the fan, he can just go run for 12 yards
Yeah.
out of thin air. Like he can just go make a play. And so they have a little bit of everything now. It's unbelievably fun to watch.
We talked about this a little bit on Sunday night, but it's just a perfect combination of structure helping your players, and when the structure breaks down, which it's inevitably going to, you can't out scheme everybody on every single play in the NFL. Like the other guys are really good and the other coaches get paid too. But when stuff breaks down, he's able to just make shit happen. I will say that Elijah Higgins touchdown in the back left corner of the end zone, he could make that throw on time if he wanted to. He passed one of those throws up and then had to make that play. But again, that's kind of the Kyler Murray experience, and you just take that. Like, if that's the end result, even if the process of getting there isn't perfect, you have to live with that if you're going to encourage that sort of playmaking attitude from him at all times.
That's exactly it. He's just gonna do that sometime. I think it was even in this last game, the first or second play of the game, they run like a little pistol rollout. The flat is there immediately, and it probably would have gotten, I don't know, 5, 6 yards. Maybe would have been tackled fast. Kyler Murray passes it up, pump fakes it, sprints out to his right, and picks up exactly 6 yards. I was like, all right, you got there one way or the other. It's just that Kyler is just going to do this 3, 4, 5 times a game, and you just have to hope that most of them are going to be good plays. And I think now with the structure of the offense being as good as it is, you have some real skill players and guys like Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride to lean on. Like, yeah, man, it probably is going to work out more often than it's not.
What's so cool about this is that I don't think we've ever seen a quarterback like this in this sort of offense before. For the most part, quarterbacks with this level of mobility, this level of creation, we put them in the gun, right? Because we make them part of the run game. Well, Drew Petzing is like a Kubiak Shanahan guy. Like that's what they were doing in Cleveland. And so they're putting him under center and having him do under center play action at a rate we don't often see with guys who are this mobile. It's funny that there's another exception this year, and that's Justin Fields and what they're doing with him in Pittsburgh. But historically, this isn't the way we see these guys used. So there was a play in the first half where he's doing like Aaron Rodgers ball handling shit. And then on a rollout, he has like a little bit of space and just like does his little turbo scurry for 9 yards. It's like, what is this? Like it just stylistically, it's just so different than what we typically see. And they've reaped the benefits. So this year, on plays where he's on the run, which NGS is 8 miles an hour or more, he's 9 of 10 for 149 yards and 3 touchdowns.
That is preposterous. That
He
is just
has
outrageous.
13 total EPA on those plays. There's only one other quarterback above 5 in the entire NFL. It's Geno, by the way. Of course, it's Geno.
Great player.
But so that unlocking him in this way, where you're getting him on the move, you're like encouraging him just because he's in that space to kind of have that playmaking feel to him. And then you combine that with the touch he has on like second level throws. Like it's all coming together in this really beautiful way. And the personnel applies to that too. Because now you have Marvin Harrison as like true number one receiver where he's going to win individual matchups for you. McBride, even Higgins, when they're in 13 personnel, which they scored their first 2 touchdowns on, Higgins and McBride are like vertical threats. So their 13 personnel is more dynamic than most teams' 13 personnel is. Michael Wilson is like a perfect, like just the ideal platonic, like the platonic ideal of a number 2 receiver, like in any offense. And I actually kind of like what Dortch is. Like Dortch is like seasoning is like he's doing all the orbit motion stuff and he's fast enough to like give you actual stretch. It all makes sense. It's very cool. I don't know what else to say about it.
I like Dortch more now that, like I said earlier, when you bring in Marvin Harrison, everyone gets knocked down the ladder a little bit, right? Now Dortch is playing in the role that like he should have been, which is a little bit more of this like just fill in the flash where we need it. Whereas last year he was kind of having to be a more serious player, which I just didn't really like. What I really love about Kyler in this offense is that if you're going to be this under center play action offense, you need a guy who can throw the shit out of the ball, and you need a guy who is very willing to just make the hardest throws on the field from the pocket. Okay, Kyler has very much grown into that style of player, and he obviously has the arm. And then if you're going to be in the gun and you still want to be a run heavy team, obviously you need your quarterback to be a part of it. Cool. Kyler Murray checks that box. And then you're going to need a guy who is comfortable with quick game and comfortable making plays, at a shotgun when things start to break down. Okay, Kyler checks all those boxes as well. Like he allows this offense to get into so many different things, and then they've built the rest of the roster to actually do all that stuff. So I don't know where this offense is going to finish, but I am just so excited to watch them every week. Like they are my appointment viewing on Tuesday type of team.
I totally agree, and I just think that it's fun to watch him in an offense that's not putting everything on him. In that Cliff offense, he's in the gun every single play. He's having to carry the load all the time. The nice thing about play action is it takes plays off your quarterback. You can literally take plays off. It's just like mentally. It's like, all right, you're gonna roll out on this play. You got like 1 to 2, and if it's not there, you can just scramble. So just that burden is not as heavy on him as it used to be. And the playing that way with more heavy personnel and more play action, it also takes the burden off your offensive line. Like we've seen the benefits of this for teams like the Saints, teams like the Cardinals. Their biggest weakness personnel wise is they don't have great individual offensive linemen. And we'll talk about that against the Lions here in a second. So let's just not make them drop back on 3rd and 8. If we're going to throw the ball, let's have it be play action. They're using it on 38% of his dropbacks this year. It's the 3rd highest mark in the league. So just one other example of how it's the right deployment of all these different pieces and the right way to potentially get the most out of them.
And that's a great point because under Cliff's offense, I mean, Kyler 35 times a game is having to play like actual quarterback and go through all his reads and do all this sort of stuff. Now in this new offense, it's probably like 20 times a game. And I know, oh, the quarterback gets to take 10 snaps off. That seems so ridiculous or whatever. But like it almost allows you to play better on the snaps where you do have to play real quarterback because you're just not as taxed every single play. Like it's why this under center, run the ball, throw play action offense works so well when it's on schedule. It's because it allows the quarterback to play a little bit more. It just he doesn't have a burden every single play. It's really nice to have, and it's cool that they've gotten here with him.
One of my favorite, just one play I wanted to mention, and I don't know if you would recognize this from when you watched. There was a 3rd and 5 at one point, and they went with like that kind of Dolphins-esque jet motion where they sent it. They believe Michael Wilson in like fast jet motion. He ran that rail up the right sideline, and so you have all this heat going to the right side, and on the back side, they had I can't remember who it was, but they had one guy run like a little through route, and then they had McBride run a whip, so where he runs to the middle of the field and then breaks back out to the left outside. And if you watch the play, Kyler starts to his right where that rail and all that motion action is going. And he sweeps all the way across the board to McBride and he completes it to McBride for a 1st down. And there's something so satisfying about the play because the timing of all of the routes matches up perfectly to where his eyes are as he scans across the field. That's just good football. Like that's
Yeah.
just purely good drop back football. And this was a good play action team last year. One of the issues was when they had to be in specific drop back situations, one, because of the line, two, just because you're not pressing as easy of a button. They struggled a little bit more. So seeing that sort of outcome when they're just dropping back on 3rd and 5 and seeing that sort of creativity, it's like, ooh, okay. If you guys are going to be doing this shit combined with everything else that we're talking about, now it's easy to start getting excited.
Yes, and you have way more of those plays, whereas under Cliff, especially the last year, it was kind of like you said, 3rd and 8 with a bad offensive line, Kyler go do something. And people were like, oh, he's an inconsistent quarterback. Really? I wonder why. I wonder why.
So let's talk about what this means against the Lions because they were able to slice and dice the Rams a little bit. I think the Lions are a slightly different challenge. If I'm trying to hone in on a reason that, the Lions can really show where they're more talented in this game, a way they can show that they're more talented, it is up front. Because if you do put this team in disadvantageous spots down and distance wise, if it is 3rd and 7, I think you could make a serious argument that when McNeil, DJ Reader, Marcus Davenport, and Aiden Hutchinson are on the field together, the Lions have a matchup advantage at all 4 of those spots if you create one-on-ones. Like, I don't think that's an exaggeration. And so that's the issue here is that if you put them in those places, we're going to see those inconsistencies creep up a little bit more. They just haven't had to be in a ton of those spots, especially last week against the Rams.
I think truly this is going to be a matter of the Lions' talent versus their discipline. Because this is a team that, even for as talented as they are up front, Aiden Hutchinson will kind of just go do whatever he wants sometimes. These linebackers will kind of just go do whatever they want sometimes. Even Dan Campbell at halftime of their last game was like, "Yeah, we're just getting out of our lane assignments," and that's why the offense was a little bit, or the Bucks offense was able to a little bit do some of what they wanted. And so I think it's basically that, and that's going to be a big thing in this game because this Arizona team, their run game will test your eyes. Like they do a lot of
It's the whole
pulling,
point.
the whole point. They do a lot of pulling. Obviously, Kyler's going to be part of the run game. They'll put some of their receivers in the backfield at time to really mess with your eyes and stuff. Like it's really going to be a big game for the Lions defense of like raw talent versus their discipline. And I think it's going to be pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Let's flip to the other side of the ball because I wanted to talk about what your impressions were from the Lions offense last week. Obviously, really frustrating game. They lose to the Bucks, struggle to put points on the board. If you're trying to pin down why that game and why that performance felt the way that it did with Detroit, where would you start?
I cannot believe I'm gonna say this, but I think they failed Jared Goff badly. Like I truly think they failed him. I which is a crazy. I'm usually the guy that's like, Jared Goff needs to give you more, and yeah, we could say he needs to make some more plays out of the pocket, but he's just never gonna be that. So whatever. I think in pass protection, this team is not as good as they should be. The Lions, I'm saying, and like they're not a bad pass protection unit, but I thought along the interior they kind of gave up a little bit more pressures than I was hoping. Like Vita Vea, I think had a really good game until he went out. Frank Ragnow was losing a little bit more than you would expect for a guy of his caliber. Even Panay
Glasgow had
Sewell.
a rough moment.
Yep.
Sewell gave up a pressure to Diaby that you don't typically see him do.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Like even Sewell had a couple of losses that he usually just doesn't give up. We'll talk about Diaby later in the show, but a great player. And then even on one of Jared Goff's interceptions, they send a linebacker straight at the running back. Jameer Gibbs just gets absolutely hammered, and it puts him in Jared Goff's lap, and he throws an interception. Like it's just a lot of stuff like that. And then even like the Jamison Williams interception that Jared Goff throws early in the game, when I first saw it and when you first see it on Sunday, it looks like Jamison Williams just gets hit as he's going on his route and like, oh, that messes up the timing, yada yada. If you watch it again, like Jamison Williams is the one who is initiating contact as he turns on this dig route. And it's like Jared Goff is not expecting him to do that. He's just expecting him to try to get to the spot and he doesn't. And so I actually thought this was the Lions offense is not as put together as I think we were hoping it would be.
I agree with that to an extent. I also think that they've been a little bit more unlucky and a little bit more volatile than you want. And I think that if one or two things change, if one or two breaks goes a different way, we're not really having this conversation. Right. So they had a 52% offensive success rate outside of the red zone last week against the Bucks. They were moving the ball. It wasn't great. It wasn't perfect, but it was fine. When they got into the red zone, everything just shut down. And I think it's a combination of a lot of different stuff. I mean, they're trying to throw a lot of screens down in the red zone, especially on third down. A lot of the short of the sticks throws that were advantageous for them last year, where it's like, all right, it's 3rd and 8. We're going to throw a screen. We're going to get 6 yards, and then we're going to run the ball on 4th and 2. A lot of those this year have been, well, it's 3rd and 10. We're going to run a screen. Shit, we gained 2 yards. We're kicking a field goal. So I think that's been part of the issue. I think that right now, I get what they're trying to do with Jamison Williams. I get it because at his best, if this works out, it's going to take your offense to a different place. And we've seen some of those flashes. I also think that they're getting a little bit preoccupied with the shiny new toys and how they're using Jamison Williams and some of the stuff they're doing with Jameer Gibbs. Part of me, because they still have the most efficient run game in the league, wants to just be like, guys, just line up and run the fucking ball. just line up and run the ball. So I think that right now they're just in a feeling out period where they're trying to figure out who they want this version of the Lions to be. And I think that it's come with some stops and starts over the first 2 games.
I think that's right. I think like I'm not concerned over the long haul for the Lions necessarily. I just think right now, to your point, they're trying some stuff, especially in the passing game with Jamison Williams, and there are like 5 plays a game where Jamison Williams just ruins something, whether it's he doesn't get all the way where he needs to on a block, or his route is a little bit at the wrong depth, or he doesn't fight for the ball. And then you just hope that he makes up for it with a 65 yard play. And like he did in this game, he had the big one down the right sideline where he was able to make a play. So they are kind of just like you said, I think in the passing game, trying to find their consistency. I don't know talent wise if they really have that. Like it seems like they've a little bit made their bed with some of these flashy players. But I'm still willing to give obviously this coaching staff some time and see if they can figure things out a little bit more.
I was like, when we watch an offense, we're like, why does this feel so frustrating? Like, why does this feel so volatile right now? And if you want to try to pin that down with the Lions, I think this is the one stat that you just need to throw out there. Last year, on tight window throws, according to Next Gen Stats, Jared Goff was #1 in the NFL in completion percentage on those plays. And just think about it anecdotally, like how many ripped balls over the middle in traffic are leading to positive, explosive gains at times for the Lions. They were
It's
number
what
one in the league.
It's what they built this thing to do. It's
Yes.
Jared Goff. We're gonna 5 and 7 step drop you on play action. You're gonna throw this damn dig route, and if you don't, we're gonna have a problem. So you better go pin it. And Jared Goff has gotten really good at making that throw
He
work.
is very good at that. He is a very good pilot for that sort of offense. So they were number one in the league, 42% completions on tight window throws. This year, they are 30th in the NFL. It's been 8%. They are one of 12 on tight window throws this year. So if that normalizes just a little bit, you get better play in the red zone, all of this stuff is probably going to be fine. The one request that I have, if I see another speed out to Jamison Williams inside the 25-yard line, I'm going to throw my laptop. Like, it just, let's not do that. Why are we doing this? You have so many capable, middle of the field, high percentage receiving options. Just dial something up for Sam Laporta the same way that you did in week 7 of last year. And let's not worry about trying to unlock all these different areas of what we're doing. Let's just play the hits every once in a while. So
Yeah,
if they start doing that, and if they're doing that against a Cardinals defense that, while weird, and while I appreciate some of the things that they're doing, like they're using more simulated pressures than any other defense in the league right now. I mean, they're trying a lot of wonky stuff in that Flores mold. They don't necessarily have the horses to make that work. So if there's a get right game for the Lions, I think this is probably going to be it on offense.
yeah. The Cardinals defense will kind of be a fun team to watch against mid and bad offenses, right? Because they'll do some cool stuff. But against the Lions, they're just gonna get mashed, bro. Like it's not even that interesting.
Let's get to this week's fourth screen email. For those of you guys who don't know, every week I solicit arguments for which game belongs on my Ford TV. And over time, this just developed into a way for you guys to send the most depressing, sad, just pathetic arguments for which game is the worst. I'm going to say this before we get into this submission from Jordan White, though. I need more from you guys on the fourth screen emails. We need more of them. We need more care put into them. This is going to be, you guys are going to decide whether we continue doing the fourth screen. If we're not getting the submissions and if they're not above a certain level of quality, we're just going to can it. So if you don't want to do it anymore, that's fine. It's no skin off my back. I'm ready to go. But if you want them to continue, I need more effort from you. Thankfully, Jordan saved you guys this week. He said, why watch a game on the fourth screen? It's not because you love good football or because of your career interests. Everyone knows that there isn't a real need to watch 4 games of the week 3 early slate. There simply isn't enough good football to require that you stayed glued onto 4 games simultaneously. So, my good man, you don't watch 4 games because you need to. You watch 4 games because you love the drama. You want to see a team with a chance to ruin its season and set itself back years of development. You want to have that 4th game with a strong chaos element, which brings me to the chaos master himself, Will Levis. Through 2 weeks of his I'm the guy year, the Mayo King has thrown 2 of the worst passes anyone has ever seen, giving the game away. He's also thrown at least one incredible bomb that will keep Titans fans like me hanging on to hope for at least a year. But this isn't just a normal Will Levis game. This is the game where he will host Malik Willis. It wasn't long ago that Titans faithful were wondering if Willis could be our guy, paired with our amazing Macho Man head coach. But ownership decided otherwise. We fired Vrabel and gave the Mayo King the keys to the kingdom. And so far, that's going about as well as Brian Callahan's What the Fuck TV appearance would suggest. You must watch this game to see if Malik plays better than Will Levis, if it's possible to throw 3 consecutive game-ending picks, if in a fit of rage, Will runs over a linebacker and puts him on IR, if Nashville starts booing its franchise quarterback 3 games into the season, Devondre Sweat, for real, he's awesome. The Packers, I guess. This is your 4th game, my friend, and I'm not sure it's close. Respectfully yours, Jordan. That was good. That was good.
That was that was absolutely beautiful. This is a man who is 2 games in already fully embraced the Will Levis experience
2
for better or
games.
worse.
I think that just might be what it is. I was trying to explain to my wife the Will Levis, Brian Callahan situation last night. Brian Callahan is a very mild-mannered person. Like, the fact that Brian Callahan was screaming at Will Levis on the sideline, I think is all you need to know about how infuriating those couple Will Levis moments have been. There was some good stuff from Will Levis last week. Like, there's some down in and down out, the bones of how he was playing. It's like, okay. Like, I see it. Like, I see some of what is encouraging about Will Levis. I think it just might be a situation where he's just going to do this. Like, once or twice a game, he's just going to lose his mind. And whether you can live with that because the other stuff is good enough becomes the most important question. But I think that might be the set of just circumstances that we're dealing with.
I think we said it going into the season. It's the Jameis Winston thing. 90% of plays, he looks like a pretty put together quarterback, and then 2 or 3 times he's gonna do something you've never seen before, and you're going to feel bad for having seen it.
I didn't have a better name for this, but I think that there should be a spot on these Thursday shows where we look at a game and we conceive of it as some sort of like loser leaves town match where there's a lot on the line. Your season is going to go one way or the other. This is a fork in the road game. And the game that we're talking about is the Ravens and the Cowboys. So, what I wanted to ask you here is who do you think this game is more important for? Who needs this game more between Dallas and Baltimore 2 games into the year?
I think it just has to be Baltimore, man. Like even if I concede that I still think this is a good team and I still think they can win a bunch of games, starting 0-3 is like that's really hard to climb out of unless you are magically the best team in football after that. Because I mean, over the stretch of the season after that, you'd have to go what like 11-4, like 10, like you'd have to win a lot of games, man. And I think that's just a really or 10-4, I guess. Like you would just have to win a lot of games. So to go there from 0-3, it's just a tough spot to be in.
So I'm not that concerned about the win loss column, even if they were to lose this week, just in like a scientific way. Because even if the Browns go to 2-1, I don't know if I believe in that Browns team. The Bengals are 0-2. So even if the Bengals go to 1-2, they're still only a game ahead of Baltimore. And Pittsburgh, there's a chance they lose this weekend and they're 2-1. So you're probably going to be only 2 games back from teams that I think objectively you're still better than. My issue, more than the wins and losses, is what would this say about where the Ravens are 3 games into this season? Dallas, there was always a timeline where the Cowboys were just a lesser version of who they were last year. They got worse on defense. They have a new defensive coordinator. It's going to take some time to figure that out. You know, the offense has moving pieces along the offensive line and added absolutely no talents to any of the skill position rooms. Like, this is not surprising necessarily if the Cowboys continue on this trajectory. Even if you were worried about Baltimore, even if you didn't think that they were going to be the best team in the AFC again, or even the second best team in the AFC, I think everyone kind of thought that they would be in the mix over the course of the year. If they lose this game and they lose this game in frustrating or depressing fashion, I think it really says something about what sort of team we're talking about here with the Ravens. And I think that would be a surprising place to land 3 weeks into the year, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. I would be especially worried if they lose this game because their offense can't get it done. Like if there is a world where Dak just puts up 35 on you, this is not the best Cowboys offense we've ever seen, but like when you're in a transition period on defense, a guy like Dak can just do that to you. Like so that wouldn't make me panic that much. But if we get into a situation where this Baltimore offense just can't beat what is a pretty untalented Dallas defense outside of a couple of guys, obviously Micah Parsons is really good, but like outside of that, their front is one of the worst in the league. And this should be a team, Baltimore is even though they haven't scored that many points so far, their rushing success rate has been really good. They've gotten a lot of yards, especially on the perimeter. Like they've figured this thing out. So they should be able to run on this team. And that should get them into some more favorable passing situations. So, like, if they cannot figure out the offense in a game where they should have a good game script, that's when I'm going to start really having some issues with this team.
You look at what New Orleans did last week. Just line up in heavy personnel and run some play action and just start taking shots at this team. And I think that's part of my frustration with the Ravens overall is that I don't think they've ever quite figured out how all of the pieces are supposed to fit together. Like, I don't think they quite know, all right, this is what Zay is supposed to be within the offense. This is how him and Rashad Bateman are supposed to coexist. This is our best way to attack people through the air. I think that there are flashes of that. There are moments where it's like, okay, they're starting to figure it out, but I still feel like it's more disjointed more often than you want it to be. And I'm not sure we've gotten any closer to the right answer.
Here's the question I would ask. Other than when they have Ricard on the field, can you think of any personnel set that they have where they have a dirty work guy? Any personnel set where they have a dirty work guy or a guy who can just do like the basic thing? Nobody. All these guys are like flashy space players.
I think you're right about that. I think it's a lot of guys who are just looking for space. Like Mark Andrews is that sort of player. It's funny that the place that I've reached is that I think what they need within this offense is the type of player we thought Rashad Bateman was going to be coming into the NFL. Like Rashad Bateman with the Ravens is weirdly like this deep threat that they use to stretch the field. Rashad Bateman has run 16 go routes this year, according to True Media. That is tied for the 11th most of any player in the NFL. That's more than DK Metcalf. That's just not what I thought Rashad Bateman would be. What they're missing is like somebody that can just like run a slant
They they
on
need
one side. You
they
go
need
ahead.
a Michael Pittman.
Yes.
Just do that. That's what I'm saying. Like, they don't have a guy who, "We need 8 yards here. Can you get me 8 yards on time and catch the football?" Nobody
And
on this offense does that.
And I think that sort of player in my mind would allow Zay Flowers to be what I think Zay Flowers should be. I don't think Zay Flowers should be this like manufactured touch underneath player. I think he should be like a diet version of what Tank Dell is, where he's running like outbreaking vertical routes as part of your offense rather than whatever they've tried to make him out to be because they have no reliable underneath targets within structure. If you just give me Michael Pittman and you pair him with what I think Zay Flowers should be, and Mark Andrews stretching his seam and whatever Isaiah Likely is, that to me makes more sense than whatever this combination of players is right now.
That's the thing because look, Zay Flowers does some cool stuff. He's really good with the ball in his hands. He is seemingly Lamar Jackson's favorite player on all their broken play stuff. Now, I think like 2 times a game, him and Lamar just connect on something that's really fun. It's like half of their best passing plays at this point. Um, but I don't think that he is that consistent of an actual outside receiver. And the thing is, that would be okay if, to your point, they had a Michael Pittman who could do the let's just get a couple of yards here. Let's do some of our basic route running stuff. Let's like have a guy who can go win the ball. The fact that they don't have anyone else like that, and Zay obviously doesn't give you any of that, it kind of makes the holes in his game a little bit more frustrating. And it's just annoying that all they can do with him is, all right, let's try to get him some screens, let's try to get him some shallows, and then twice a game Lamar is going to run outside the pocket and find him. That's just not that cannot be the way to get your best player the ball. Like, that just doesn't make it's not going to be an efficient offense that way.
But every once in a while, like there's that big over he ran against the Chiefs. Like he can do some real receiver stuff. I just wish that they had a slightly more reliable option as their secondary player on the outside to complement what he does. I think it would all just make more sense than whatever this looks like. One more game we wanted to talk about here. I have no cute name or conceit for any of this, but the Chargers and the Steelers are both 2-0. And I feel like we really should talk about this game. And I guess my main question as we look forward to this is who do you think is a more legitimate team at 2-0? Like a legitimate threat to be in the playoffs, a team that we will take seriously by the end of the year between these two teams, the Chargers and the Steelers?
I had a really hard time with this. I think when we first kind of started thinking about this, I was leaning the Chargers. I love Justin Herbert. Jim Harbaugh is the funniest coach in the league already, and he's obviously a great coach as he is. But then I just looked at it a little bit more. I'm buying in on the Steelers defense a little bit. I think their offense is a lot better than well, not a lot better. Their offense is a little bit better than the points that they've been able to put up at this point. I think there's some reason to have some optimism. So I'm going to lean with Tomlin. I just he always finds a way to get to 9 or 10 wins, and I don't think it's that crazy for him to do it again.
How do you feel about the Justin Fields experience and what it's been like over the first 2 weeks? And the fact that it seems like he is going to be the quarterback for the foreseeable future.
I think it's been fine. Like, it's kind of been almost in the way that I would categorize the Sam Darnold experience, where it's like it's kind of what you paid for, where they've done a lot of the under center stuff, they've done a lot of the boot stuff, they've done a lot of play action. You can't really get him to do a lot of the drop back game, but like because I think they've been running the ball at a decent clip, they've gotten into some heavier personnel, they've gotten him to throw at the tight ends a lot, and gotten him outside of the pocket. They've actually kind of unlocked a lot of the best parts of his game and kind of insulated him from having to do a lot of the true drop back throw over the middle of the field stuff that he struggles with. And I think that's kind of what you come to expect from a guy like Mike Tomlin. I know this offensive staff, struggled and cycled the guys in and out for a long time, but now you bring in a guy like Arthur Smith, who I think we both believe is a pretty good offensive coordinator. The fact that he gets to run the show now, I think they've actually done a pretty good job. And again, this isn't going to be an offense that scores 30 points a week or anything, but I think they can get to a decent enough spot where Fields is playing the game that he wants to play, and the defense is going to keep them in every game.
Yeah, instead of asking him to be Aaron Rodgers like the
Yeah, he's
Bears
just
staff
that's
did for the
not
last 5 years, just cut the field in half. Just make things as easy as possible on him and allow him to use the mobility that he has and the arm that he has, which is pretty good. And so I think that that's been the plan so far. And so far, I think it's gotten as good of a return as you could possibly want from Justin Fields at this stage. I think my answer is the Chargers. I don't feel great about it. And the reason that I would land on the Chargers is similar to the optimistic case for the Chargers coming into the year, where, okay, the offensive line can be a defined strength for this team. And I do think that we are trending in that direction. If you look at the way that Rashawn Slater has played over the first couple games, he seems like he's really back into form, that kind of borderline all pro guy that we had seen early in his career. Joe Alt has had some really nice flashes. We've seen Zion Johnson take a step forward. That group overall, I think, is going to be a defiant strength for this team. If not by the end of the season, or if not by the middle of the season, then I think by the end of the season. You combine that with a very good quarterback. And if your offensive line is really good and your quarterback is really good, I think you can live with some of the question marks in the pass catching spots. And who knows, maybe Quentin Johnson's just a star. We're just going to have to get used to that sort of reality. But I do like that as a foundation. And I think that they're playing some really good football on defense. Here's the question. Is the really good football that they're playing on defense a product of the teams that they've played over the first 2 weeks? The Raiders have the worst run game I've ever seen. Like,
It
right?
is so bad.
The
It's
worst run
shocking.
game I've ever seen. It is disgusting. Okay. So that's what they were dealing with in week 1. And then in week 2, they played a quarterback who was drafted number 1 overall, was benched after 18 games. Do you know how bad you have to play to be the number 1 overall pick and get benched 2 games into your second season? So I'm wondering how much of this is real and how much of this is the competition. I'm impressed by what Jesse Minter has done. I think the defense feels dynamic. I like the players they have up front. They lead the NFL in defensive success rate. I don't think that it continues at that clip, but if they can be like an average defense, have a top 5 offensive line, and Justin Herbert, even if he's a little bit hampered, I still think I'm going to bet on that over whatever the Steelers are going to be trying to piece together with Justin Fields, but it's probably pretty close.
I think defensively it is kind of both. Like I've loved the energy that they have up front. Like I think they're a lot of their edge guys are playing at a really high level, especially even in the run game. Like I think the defense looks more energized, and that's good. It's just again the level of competition. I would like to see what it looks like against a serious offense. And even this week, like for as much as I just said the
Yeah,
Steelers
you're
are
probably not
okay
going
on
to get
offense,
that. Yeah.
you're not getting that this week. Like this is still a pretty limited offense that you're having to play against. The difference will be I do want to now see them against a team that can run the ball. The Steelers can do that. And so I think it'll be interesting to go from again playing the Raiders, who maybe the worst run game like I've ever seen. I looked it up. They had like a 17 rushing percent success rate. And I was like, that
It's
almost
gross.
seems impossible how bad it was. Like
It,
it's shocking.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. I've had to watch a little bit of it because I was just in a situation in fantasy football where I almost had to keep Zamir White because of how cheap he was. Where it's just like, I mean, whatever. If it doesn't do anything, I spent $4 on him. It doesn't really matter. So I've watched it out of the corner of my eye, and I have been horrified, but by what I've had to watch.
And
There's some new pieces on the Chargers defense where I'm like, all right, Christian Fulton, right? Like you buy low on corners that have buying low on corners who've had promising moments in the league is a good thing to do if you are a team devoid of resources, right? Like that is the sort of dice roll that's worth it. And I actually think he's been playing pretty well for them. And I know he's banged up right now, but I've liked some of the stuff I've seen from Junior Colson, where it's just like, okay, all right, like at 25 is doing some stuff. I'm looking forward to watching this guy over the next couple of years.
listen, the linebacker rotation they have, it's not bad. Again, I don't know if anyone's a star, but you have Denzel Perryman still coming up and making plays between the tackles. Like Deion Henley has his moments, Junior Colson. It's like, okay, they're competent across the board here. This is good. I think my overall feeling on the Chargers, though, I think I agree with everything you said in terms of the offensive line being on track. Obviously, the quarterback is incredible. The team generally looking like they are in the right direction for what they wanted when they brought in this coaching staff. I'm just not quite as convinced that it matters for winning games this season. Like
Yeah, I
that
think
it's
that's fair.
going to win them enough games. That's basically where I'm at with it. Whereas like I look at Tomlin and I'm like, he'll find a way.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, the Chargers are number one in the league in defensive success rate. I think they're like 26th in pressure rate, even with some of the flashes that we've seen from the edge guys. The Steelers are in the top 3. The Steelers are going to be in the top 3. It's a good bet that the Steelers are going to be a problem on defense over the course of the year. And I think one of the biggest issues the Steelers have had to this point is offensive line inconsistency in rotating right tackles and just all the guys they've been slotting in and out. Isaac Salamalu has missed some time. It's been a problem so far, but I actually think that there's an outcome if they just stick with Dan Moore at left tackle, if they put Fontenot in at right tackle, if Salamalu comes back at left guard, where it's like, all right, we're good. Like we've solved this. It sucks that our first round pick from last year can't break the starting lineup. I think that there are probably some development mistakes that they made in the ways that they were bringing him along over the last year or so, but I don't think it's out of the question that they land in a decent place along the offensive line.
Yeah, I'm like mildly optimistic here. I think they've already been a pretty good run team, and obviously the pass protection gets some help by just being in the structure of offense, where running the ball, booting, and all that stuff. I would like them to sort out the right tackle situation. Just pick a guy and let's figure it out. But Dan Moore has been kind of a surprise at left tackle. He's a guy who I thought was kind of a pain point for this offensive line for a long time, but he's been fine so far this season, and that for what we thought we were getting from him, that is totally acceptable. And then their center right guard situation. Zach Frazier and James Daniels, they are moving people. They are hurting people. And so, like you said, you get maybe Sayamalu back in the lineup. They can maybe get, figure out the right tackle spot a month from now and really get that solidified and not be rotating guys. Like, yeah, man, this could kind of quietly like creep up into being one of the better offensive lines in the league. And I like both of their running backs still. Like, I know everyone wants to dunk on Najee Harris, but I think he's still a good player. And then Jalen Warren is still a good player. Like these, I think they've got the pieces here.
The fact that James Daniels is playing well and the Bears are dealing with whatever they're dealing with on the interior of the offensive line is just like a cruel, cruel joke being played on me weekly at this point.
And then Lucas Patrick playing well for the
I don't
Saints.
want I that one I don't
It's
want to talk
just
about. That one I truly do not want to talk about. Let's get to this week's Under the Hood. Each week, we like to kind of take a step back and look at a unit that is playing a little bit worse or a little bit better than we might have expected. And I wanted to talk about the Colts offense, which has been struggling over the last couple of weeks to find some consistency, especially throwing the ball. When you went back and really dug into what the Colts offense looked like against the Packers last week, what's your general feeling about where this group sits 2 games into the year?
it's fine. Like they're gonna be okay. This is a lot of the issues that I have with them are not structural. It's not even like they have a talent deficit. It's just a lot of young guys making young mistakes or even just uncharacteristic mistakes from some of their veterans. Like to me, we thought going into the season, we thought the run game and RPO game was going to be really good. Okay, it has been. Like the quarterback run game, when they've leaned to it, has been really good. The offensive line has been really good in the run game. Jonathan Taylor has looked incredible. They've gotten what they wanted out of that. And then they've been an explosive passing offense. Like they've found ways to get the ball down the field. And even in this last Packers game, they found opportunities to get the ball down the field. And then like somebody just made a mistake. Like there was one, Anthony Richardson almost hit Alec Pierce like way deep down the left sideline. And Pierce just slips. It's like, is that going to happen every single week? Probably not. There was another one where on 3rd and 5, Anthony Richardson rolls out of the pocket to his left, finds Pierce again over the middle of the field, called back for a penalty. It's like this stuff is just not going to happen to them every week. And so I think Anthony Richardson is still making some mistakes. He's a young player. And that's actually the last thing I want to say here. We all came into the season, Anthony Richardson. We were like, he's a player who's going to have ups and downs. He's a volatile player. He's still a work in progress. And we're seeing the work in progress, and now we're panicking. And it's like, guys, this is what we signed up for. We knew that this was part of the equation here. If this is still going on in December, yeah, then we can panic. But it's 2 weeks into the season when he's coming off of an injury. Like, let's slow down a little bit. Like, it'll be okay.
The first pick, the one where we're in the normal rhythm of the game, you're not down 2 scores in the 4th quarter, that's a gross play.
I
Like,
have no coat for that one. That's just
that
a
that
bad play.
that's a play where it's just like he's drifting back and to his left. He never sets his feet and the ball just skies on him. But other than that, there weren't that many throws in this game where I was just like, ugh. Right. I didn't have that reaction to a lot of the things that happened. I had that reaction to a lot of the moments in this game from the Colts offense, but they weren't rooted in Anthony Richardson. It was Jonathan Taylor fumbling on a screen. It was a wrong read on a read option play where it's a tackle for a TFL or for a 3-yard loss in the red zone because he should have pulled it and didn't. There's a drop from AD Mitchell on 3rd down in the 2-minute drill that would have given them a first down. So I think that it's just inconsistent play across the board. This is an offense that is going to be volatile, right? There, Anthony Richardson's averaging 13.7 air yards per attempt this season. Okay. 13.7. Here, the league average is 7.4. Okay. There are 14 teams in the league right now averaging less than 50% on a given play of Anthony Richardson's air yards per target. They're at like 6.7, right? So it's 50% of what he's doing. That's going to lead to volatility. And when you combine that with a bunch of young, inexperienced players, it's only going to increase that volatility. So I think that this is just going to be how this group feels for a little bit based on how it's constructed and how they want to play when they're throwing the ball.
Yeah, they are playing a different sport than most people because I think a lot of teams right now are seeing the cover 2 stuff and they're like, all right, we're going to run the ball a little bit, and then we're going to try to like quick game, piece this thing apart. We're not going to try to earn these explosives. We're just going to accept that this is going to have to be a march down the field type of thing. The Colts are like, screw that shit, man. Like, we're going to run the ball and pound you. And then when we throw it, we're throwing a post route. We're throwing a dig route. We're throwing a corner. Like, we are throwing the damn ball. And so it's just a different style of offense than I think we're getting from most teams. And I think it makes sense, though. You go and draft a guy like A.D. Mitchell. What does he do? He runs down the field. Alec Pierce is still in the offense. That's what he does. He runs down the field. And then obviously Anthony Richardson, when you have a quarterback with that type of arm, you should be testing down the field and really forcing defenses to respect it. So again, when you are playing such a volatile style of passing offense with a lot of young players, trying to learn a new system, yeah, man, like there's going to be some growing pains. And again, if this is an issue in November, we can panic. But for now, like I see enough of the bones of a good offense that I'm willing to give this some time.
Yeah, the run game still looks really good. They're second in the NFL in rushing success rate. The only complaint I have about the run game is I want more quarterback designed runs. I know that you don't want to get him hurt. I know that that's probably at front of mind for everybody in that organization, but this is the choice that you have made. You have chosen this life with a guy like Anthony Richardson. He has 5 design runs over the first 2 games. Not enough. I'm not asking him to run the ball 10 times a game, but 6, right? Like what he is as a weapon, I think you have to lean into that if you're going to find the best version of this offense, even if you can be a little bit skittish because of some of the health stuff. The other part of his game that I do want to mention, and I say this kind of in jest, but kind of not, he throws the ball too hard.
I want to say that it's like a dumb thing to say, but it's actually true. Like he truly does throw the ball too hard sometimes.
Looking at the numbers, his average throw is like 32 miles per hour, which is the highest rate in the NFL. I mean, he's just throwing the ball with more muster than anybody else in the league. That's not a problem in and of itself, but it's the types of throws where he's consistently just letting it rip as hard as he can unnecessarily. Like, you don't need to throw a stick route 6 yards off the line of scrimmage as hard as you possibly can. And I do think that is leading to some of the inconsistencies because guys are just having trouble hanging on to the football on some of those throws. Like, if you want to throw that ball to Ashton Doolin 40 miles an hour as hard as you possibly can, like physically can, great. Because you're trying to fit that ball into a tight window. You don't need to throw it through a guy's face mask standing 7 yards away from you. And I do think that has led to some of the issues that we've seen. It's not necessarily accuracy, it's accuracy plus touch. The misses are going to look worse when you're putting that much behind it on some of those shorter throws.
It's a specific throw type of thing. It is the issue, and it's a double edged sword. Like you mentioned, the dig route he threw to Ashton Doolin on the backside in week 1. You only throw that if you can throw that thing 100 miles an hour and just absolutely gun it in there. Like there are 3 quarterbacks maybe who can make that throw. At the same time, there was, I think in that same game, he tries throwing an over route to Michael Pittman and he throws it like a line drive on like Pittman's back hip. And it's like, that's a route you have to lead out and like let your guy go get it towards the sideline. Like give the ball some air, let your guy go get it. And he just throws it like it's like he's throwing to a spot. And it's like, that's just, you cannot throw that route like that. And so it's just little stuff like that. And we've seen quarterbacks be like this before. Cam Newton was like this for a majority of his career. Josh Allen was like this early on in his career. Justin Herbert, even for as great as he is, has like a little bit of this to him too. So
He
like
absolutely does.
it's just a matter of like this will probably never fully go out of his game, right? But if you can cut it down to where this is a problem on 1 throw a game instead of 3 or 4, that's when we're gonna get into the real like, okay, he's matured as a passer type of stage.
It's funny because I was talking to him this summer and we were just talking about some of the stuff that he was working on this year. And one of the things he mentioned to me is that there are these like second level throws that Matthew Stafford has where he's trying to layer it over like a linebacker or a defender in the middle of the field. And that's a lot of the stuff that he was working on this offseason. And that's actually, to me, a very good comparison. Matthew Stafford has as strong of arm of like anyone that has ever played professional football, but the touch that he has on some of these throws is he's feathering the ball to different areas of the field. That's what you need. Just because you have this sort of arm doesn't mean you need to tap into it all the time. And I think that's something that will come as he gets more experience and as he plays a little bit more. But right now, I do think it is adding to their issues a little bit.
Right, and I think that's an important thing we need to consider, especially with young players and young sides of the ball and all that stuff. It can both be true that what Anthony Richardson is doing right now is a problem for the state of the offense and is not good football, and also like this is something that can figure itself out in time and might not be a problem later. Like we can have both thoughts at the same time.
It's time for our second installment of the airing of grievances. We're trying this out on this year's show. Every week, we've opened the voicemail lines. We want to hear from you guys. We want to hear with some sort of issue you have about something we've said, something we've done, just a way to inject a little bit of tension, a little bit of disagreement into a show and into a space that can be a little bit too agreeable every so often. So, Beller, why don't you hit us with this week's iteration?
Hi, Robert. I hope you take this grievance in the spirit of love, admiration, and respect that I intended. Could you and your fellow NFL podcasters take it easy on the ostentatious, over-the-top celebration of big, tough football guy stuff? It feels so very performative. We get it. You're not just a bunch of dorks with podcasting mics and access to the All-22. You don't need to keep tweeting clips of a duo run and saying, two big guys blocking a second big guy, hang it in the Louvre. You don't need to keep tweeting clips of a linebacker coming downhill on a run stop and saying, hook it right into my veins. You don't need to rewrite the Iliad to be about a 3-yard fullback dive. It's not necessary, really. Thanks, Andrew.
No.
Yeah, no. First of all, no. For two reasons. First of all, this is the way the sport works. Big, fast people hit big other fast people. That's why they wear pads. Second of all, the other reason I love this, I'll be fully honest with this. I'm like 5'10", 150 pounds. I've never been a big man. I could never even fathom myself doing some of the stuff that Dante Hightower taking on a guard. That's why it's so cool to watch. I could never consider myself doing something like that. I can't see that world. So the fact that there are people like him who can go make plays like that, it blows my mind. And that's why those are the guys I want to see play football.
I was never built like that, but I played football for a very long time. I don't have any insecurities about my football bona fides and my ability to talk about the sport. I played football for a while. I have the back problems to prove it. That hit that CJ Gardner Johnson made on that Monday night game, the sound
Oh,
makes. I know what that feels like. I know the tingle you feel in your face when that happens. And what I said when that happened was that awoken something like deep in my soul because it did. That feeling, that sound, I know what that is in my bones. And there is nothing more beautiful when that happens. And on the flip side of this, you may think it's performative. That's totally fine. I tweeted out a double team that the Cardinals had in that game from last week against the Rams last night at like 10 p.m. while I'm watching tape. I don't care. Like I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a nice moment of detail that shows why this team is what it is, and I wanted to put it on the internet. But at the core of this, you're not going to take away my excitement about this. That is what sets this apart. I think that we're in a really cool era, and I'm not even talking about myself. I think we're in a really cool era for football analysis. And I think one of the reasons that we're in that era is that there are a lot of people who genuinely love the game. And that excitement for what they're watching every single week is permeating their analysis. There is a joy to this that coincides with, I think, some of the smart football bullshit that I think has become pretty prevalent around the football internet. I've been doing this for a long time, and I truly don't believe that I'm any smarter than anybody else. I don't think I know that much more. I don't think I'm funnier than most other people that do this. I got two things working for me that allow me to be viable in this space. I'm enthusiastic and I'm curious. And if I lose any one of those in any capacity, I've lost whatever it is that makes me doing this. So I'm sorry. Like if you think it's performative, you think it's over the top, that's fine. But it's too hard to maintain excitement when you're doing this for decades at a time. And I'm going to do everything that I possibly can to hold on to that.
and you know what? Maybe it is performative, even from my end. But to me, the stuff like that, whether it's a duo run, a linebacker taking on a guard, it's specific to football, right? Like watching a guy just run
That's
really
the game.
fast or make
That's
a
what this game is.
yes, like watching a guy make a cut. It's like okay, I could see that in basketball, right? Like obviously, it's still a different sport entirely, but you can see that type of thing, or guys just running in space in soccer, something like that. But two guys moving another 300-pound guy, that's football, man. Like it's just that is a very unique to football type of thing, and that's why it's so exciting for me.
And especially right now, especially at this moment that we've reached, where the run game and physicality and your ability to dictate in those ways is going to show us who are the good teams and who are not over the course of this season. The structure of the sport necessitates that sort of physicality right now. Those are the haves and those are the have-nots. It's become more important to me than it's probably ever been as I think about the game. So no, like those sorts of moments and identifying those sorts of moments, that's not going away. I'm sorry.
That's how I'm identifying the good teams right now. So I need to tweet those clips.
Before we get out of here, we're going to end these shows every single week. Just looking forward to the weekend and talking about what we want to know. Like by the end of week 3, what do you want to know that you don't think you have a really good handle on right now?
For me, it's this Falcons offense going to be like a week to week thing? I mean, obviously, first week they come out and they are the most binary offense that I've like ever seen. Like everything was in the pistol. Like they were only running from the pistol. Whenever they were in the gun, it was pure pass. Like everything was just so siloed. And obviously, we thought that was because Kirk wasn't healthy. They come out week 2. I still don't think Kirk is very healthy, but they do a lot more of the under center, all that other stuff. It looks like a more normal offense. They run the ball really well. Kirk looks okay, but it's like I just think any team that can move Kirk off his spot, we're just going to be back where we were in week 1. So, like, is this just going to be a week to week based on how often can you get Kirk off his spot? And that's kind of what I want to know. And I think against Spags, we're going to find out.
Yeah, it's gonna. Where's Chris Jones going to be? If Chris Jones can get
Yeah.
Caleb McGarry twice, do we see a similar sort of Falcons offense to the one we saw in week 1? And does it feel that way? I think that's actually a very good thing. I'm going to stick in the NFC South and I'm going to talk about the Saints because what I want to know is how real is this Saints offense? And when I say that, this is what I mean. We've seen other offenses explode in the first couple weeks of the season because they're doing something very specific, right? It's like this is how we can pull all the levers we want against opposing defenses. What the Saints have done is they're lining up in heavy personnel and they're running the shit out of play action. And they got the Cowboys in base defense and they're just running all these big posts and crossers. It's old school football, right? Like it's the type of football that was gashing offenses in like 2017. And I wonder if we get them in a spot where we're asking them to drop back on 3rd and 8, and that offensive line that still has some question marks isn't allowed to just wad it up to one side, or you can't have 2 extra tight ends in there slicing across the formation to seal off the backside on some of these play action throws. Can they still be the sort of offense that they are when they're playing the game on their terms? They've run 22 non-play action passes through 2 weeks. 22. When that number increases, what does the Saints offense look like? I don't know. There's a chance that they're just going to throw the shit out of the ball. And there's a chance that Clint Kubiak is just a guy that we should be talking and thinking a lot more about. I am open to that reality. I just want to get a better sense of it as we get a little bit more exposure to this offense.
I also would like to see that. Like Derek Carr, I think has thrown more passes with play actions or screens than he has without, which is
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. That's just that is not sustainable football over the course of throughout December.
You
So
can't do that. You
you
cannot
just
keep
can't.
playing that
You
way.
can't get away with it. They can't keep getting away with it, and they won't. And I just want to see what it's going to look like when they can't.
The Dolphins from last year are a very good example, right? When the Dolphins were able to play the game on their terms, they looked a certain way. When the game was no longer played on their terms, they started to struggle. We saw where the weak points were. You saw some of the personnel deficiencies. They couldn't fight left-handed, which is ironic because of the left-handed quarterback. But if you can you make the Saints fight left-handed, and what do they look like when that happens? There's a chance they move through it, and they're going to be a team that we're talking about for the rest of the year. But those are the sorts of things that I think you want to get a better handle on as we move from the first couple weeks into the season toward the middle. All right. That is all we got. Sincerely appreciate all of you guys listening. We will be back on Sunday night. If you want to check out our live stream post of the week 3 games, you can do that on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/theathleticfootballshow. We would love to hang out with you guys on Sunday night. Otherwise, this will be available in your podcast feed the same way it always is. For now, appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you very soon.